The Appalachian mountain range is one of the oldest on Earth. It began forming almost 500 million years ago, when Africa and North America collided during the continental drift. The pressure directed the range up from the crust, creating summits that once reached heights that could have rivaled the Himalayas. Since then, this land has witnessed the fall of dinosaurs and the rise of humans. It has seen things that we can never imagine, and has memories of things that we will never understand. Over time, humans began to learn the land and discover the secrets and wisdom that it had to share. More importantly, they began to document what was happening as a way to pass the teachings along. The southern Appalachians are home to a developing number of sites that have been discovered which contain ancient petroglyphs. Many of these are only now being cataloged in the hopes of conserving them. If you travel high up into the Balsam Mountains of western North Carolina, there is a unique site that is sacred in the Cherokee religion. A large piece of soapstone jutting out from the remnants of cornfield that has hundreds of bizarre markings that are said to have been carved by a hair-covered giant. The Cherokee have long spoken of Judaculla, or, as some call him, Sulkalu. He gets his name from the appearance of his eyes. It translates to, he has them slanting, referring to the pupil which was slanted like a cat's. Judaculla was a being that roamed the earth long before man was even a thought. He was the guardian of the land and all of the life within it. When humans finally began to emerge, they did not yet know how to survive. So Judaculla was there to teach these new creatures all the things they would need to know. Legend holds that Judaculla was a staggeringly ugly giant, standing over 7 feet tall with thick hair covering his body. His hands had 7 fingers tipped with sharp claws and his feet had 7 toes. Despite the monstrous appearance, he was heavily active in the lives of the Cherokee and had even taken a human woman to be his wife. It was here, on this large piece of soapstone, that the Cherokee believed Judaculla left his teachings. There are an estimated 1,548 individual carvings that many believe are a map of local resources and hunting laws. Archaeologists estimate that the markings were carved throughout the late Woodland to late Mississippian periods, about 500 to 1700 AD. Over the years, the Judaculla rock has been damaged by weathering, erosion, vandalism, and chalkings. The Parker family, who have owned the property where the rock sits since the 1800s, are the caretakers. The rock, and 1 acre around it, was donated to the county in 1959 by Miles Parker. The family has since donated 100 acres of land for the historical site in 2011, so that anyone can visit and cast their wonders upon its mysteries. Just a few miles away to the southwest, along the Blue Ridge Parkway, rests the sinister-looking peak known as Devil's Courthouse. The trail to the top is a strenuous, half-mile trek, but the reward is worth the effort. It is here, hidden in a cave, deep within the mountain, that Judaculla calls home. And atop the summit is the judgment seat where he observes his kingdom. On a clear day, you can see North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia, making it one of the most beautiful and most visited sites in the state. It is a habitat for numerous rare species of high-altitude plants left over from the last glacial period, and animals such as the peregrine falcon. The legend says that, one day, a hunting party had entered Judaculla's land, trespassing and violating the laws they had set down by hunting without first receiving his blessing. He was so enraged that he leapt from his throne at Devil's Courthouse, landing on the soapstone with enough force to leave an imprint of his seven-fingered hand upon the stone. He then gave chase to the hunters, frightening them away. When early European settlers arrived in the area, some of them had reportedly encountered a beast that they had called the Indian Satan. Judaculla's handprint has also been found on other boulders throughout the Cherokee lands, and there are at least 12 locations that make reference to his name. To the Cherokee, he was no devil, but a protector of the land, whose wishes and boundaries should be respected. To others who had crossed paths with him, he was something that frightened them and had given a face to the boogeyman that haunted their dreams. Today, the modern world has largely moved out of the woodlands and has forgotten many of the old stories that were handed down. Being in the forest these days is more for recreation than the struggle for survival that it used to be. However, more and more people have been venturing back into the forest in search of wild game, adventure, spiritual healing, and even beginning new lives. With a growing number of people re-entering the forest, it isn't long before the wild starts to introduce itself once again. And sometimes it might not be what you'd expect. The Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, or BFRO, currently lists a total of 106 reports in their database for North Carolina. Many of these reports take place within the areas of legend and feature encounters with a giant, ugly, hair-covered creature.
I've got families that are 5th to 8th generation that I keep in touch with, and they have sightings and stories in their families that they don't share too often, but they know they're here, they expect to see them, they leave them alone, they get along, and it's been going on for years. My name's Jim Charneski. I'm a field researcher for Bigfoot Field Research Organization, and I live in western North Carolina. I was born and raised in Columbus, Ohio, and as a kid growing up, every week or two there was always something in the back of the newspaper about somebody seeing something running through the fields, and I always thought it'd be interesting to hunt for Bigfoot. And about 12 years ago, I thought, well, while I'm still young enough to get out in the woods and do it, I'd better get started. And at that time, I found the BFRO, and they were one of the few organizations that were interested in true research at that time. And I started going on trips with them, and it took me about 3 years until I was able to become an investigator with them. There's several areas around here that have multiple sightings each year. It's not quite as heavy density as other parts of the state, but basically along the Tennessee-North Carolina border, we get a lot of reports on down towards the South Carolina border. I have a sneaking suspicion from my research that they tend to migrate up here to the higher elevations in the hottest part of the summer. And then, it's a short day or two walk to get down off the mountain into South Carolina or parts of Tennessee that would have a little milder winter than up here in the mountains. For the last hundreds of years or longer, people have been seeing something, and I don't think it's all misidentifications and hoaxes. I think there's usually a little bit of credibility for each of the lore and folk tales from many different cultures. I would have to think that over the centuries that people are seeing something and they're describing what they see to the best of their ability at the time. So I give some credence to the folklore and other stories from Native Americans and the early settlers.
Since the days of Judaculla, others have spoken tales of a large, hair-covered creature that roams the woods. The locals of Haywood County call him Boojum, a being that lived in the Balsams and had an obsession with gemstones. Boojum had an eye for finding the rubies and emeralds that are scattered throughout the mountains. He would then hide them in old liquor jugs, left behind by moonshiners, and stash them away in the many caves that lie scattered beneath the mountains. In those days, it was common for people to venture down to the creek to bathe. There was a young woman by the name of Annie who had encountered Boojum while taking a bath. She locked eyes with the creature, but instead of running away, she became lost in the gaze of his sad eyes. In time, Annie had fallen in love with Boojum, eventually leaving her life behind to live with him in the wild. They lived together for quite a while, but Boojum still loved venturing out into the forest in search of his beloved gemstones. While he was off on his many long trips, Annie would grow lonesome and concerned. Sometimes she would set out in search of Boojum, calling out to him by mimicking the hooting sound that he made. According to a folklorist by the name of John Paris, this became the origin for the term Hootin' Annie or Hootenanny, which refers to a loud gathering or party. In August of 2019, a small group of people entered the woods near Fontana Lake to investigate several strange reports that had come from the area. The group spent several days exploring, placing digital audio recorders and trail cameras. On the second day of the trip, one of the group began noticing something odd. Over the past several years, this area has gained some notoriety within the pages of Missing 411, a series of books written by David Paulides that focus on unusual disappearances. This particular location was chosen because it is within a cluster of different disappearances that could have occurred under bizarre circumstances.
Almost 82 inches tall is where the break is. Almost 7 feet off the ground.
He caught my eye. I'm like, what the hell? About 7 again? That's pretty close. 6'6". 6'5". Oh. Oh, I threw it. Okay. I was looking at something.
Oh, yeah, roughly about the same time. General area.
I think it went up or down.
What is here that would hit that and cause that to break like that?
Nothing.
There's nothing on the ground.
That was a very interesting one. It was a little bit smaller than some of the other ones that I've seen, but that was still enough girth and size to the tree that it took considerable force to do it. You seem to have done a good job of researching the area around it, you know, looking for any other evidence that could have caused it. Following up with the dimensions and how it was twisted, which is very good. Also the height, you know, anything that's twisted 6, 7, 8 feet off the ground is going to limit what could do that as well. I don't see somebody carrying a ladder out in the woods to twist something 7 feet off the ground. That would take considerable effort. But if you find branches broken or branches broken along a trail, that it's obvious that something is trying to keep the branches out of their way so that they can move quickly up and down the trail. I'd say, you know, that's a good possibility that you may have found a hunting spot or an area where they're trying to move quickly. I've seen some very impressive tree twist that whatever did it had to have just immense strength. I've seen a tree break over near Uwharrie, east of Charlotte, that was a log about that big around, twisted from about 3 foot to 6 foot. It was green. It was twisted so many times that it splintered, and the fragmented splinters of that twist were about 36 inches long. Huge. Nothing else around it was disturbed. The investigator that found it, cut it off and has it in his living room. Branches 4 or 5, almost 6 inches in diameter, twisted probably 25, 30 times to the point that, they splintered and fractured like you and I would twist a dandelion. What can do that in the woods, I think, is very few and far between. A bear certainly can't do that. They may have the strength, but they don't have the dexterity in their paws or hands to do something like that. Some of the ones that I've seen, I don't know a human alive that is that strong. Some of the structures I kind of have to question until they're thoroughly researched. If there's a windstorm and branches fall and get tangled up, okay, you can say that's natural. If you find a structure that is made out of wood and there's no trees nearby out of that wood, meaning that the limbs and the wood had to be moved physically, it's like, all right, that adds a little more credibility to it. On the other hand, with the number of people doing bushcraft things and hoaxes out in the woods, just because a limb is moved several hundred yards or further doesn't necessarily mean it's a Bigfoot, but each one of those, I think, has to be investigated carefully on a per case basis. No, I'm just thrilled that Bigfoot research is increasing worldwide. And it's not just the tabloid stuff that was so popular even 20 years ago. The amount of true research going on is really surprising. And with the BFRO that started in 1995, we've collected a little over 72,000 reported sightings in this country that we're trying to investigate all of them. People are seeing something. It's not all hoaxes and pranks by your next door neighbor or hunting buddy. So if we can add just a little bit more knowledge, I think that's fabulous. Like the 411 books, some of the stories I think do have a little bit of credibility. In my personal opinion, I think they stretch things a little far sometimes, because there's probably 1,000 reasons that somebody could disappear in these woods before I'd ever start thinking about a Bigfoot abduction. Unless there was serious evidence found leading in that direction, I would find it a little difficult, not impossible, but at least a little difficult to come to those conclusions.
There is one more thing that the legends all seem to have in common: the presence of caves.
You went under the rock, you right there. I want to say that one opens up too, but it's wet.
Yeah, I don't know what's happened right.
Let me see. That's the big cave though.
That's the big one.
Like, I wouldn't belly crawl, but... Huh? Huh?
I think I got that.
From the late 1800s on up to the 20s and 30s, a lot of the family farms and areas here had their own little mines. This is one of the richest gemstone and mineral areas on the East Coast. So this was a pretty depressed financial area. But any of the family farms, if somebody came to town and said, if you've got this rock on your farm, you dig it up, I'll give you money, they did it. And a lot of the older family farms that I've visited had little mines, and little, I'm meaning sometimes they were just barely big enough to climb into, just a depression dug back into the mountain. Whether it's for gemstones or uranium or any of the other minerals, I think they're opportunists. If they find a little cave or nook that they can climb into for shelter and be safe sleeping, I think they'd use it.
In North Carolina, there are an estimated 900 caves and caverns, many of which are off limits to the public. A multitude of life calls these subterranean voids home. Ever since the words Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and Yeti were introduced to the world at large, countless people have taken it upon themselves to seek answers to their questions. Today, there are even more who have volunteered to leap down the rabbit hole into the mysterious caverns below in search of a real-life giant. But what if you actually find one?
Another encounter that I had was we got a report from some trout fishermen that had been hiking up to a wild trout stream, and they'd hiked about 5 miles back into the woods and camped there for 2 nights. And the first night they heard something circling their camp. You know, they could hear footsteps, they could hear some snorting. They weren't sure what it was. The second night they heard that again, and then something started throwing rocks and acorns at their tent. They got spooked and headed out and called us, and a group of us investigators headed down there and backpacked into where the fishermen had been. First night there, we didn't hear or see anything. So we decided to move camp. And right above where the trout fishermen had been, at the top of the ridge, there was 3 ridges that joined in one spot. And there was game trails along the tops of those ridges. So we camped at the top where those 3 trails met. And we sit there, and each one looking over the other person's shoulder so they could see down the game trail. And one of the guys said, "Jim, grab your night vision. There's one behind you." And in the time it took for me to reach down, get my night vision, turn, and look at it, it had stepped off the trail behind a very large fallen pine tree. And unfortunately, this was an older Generation 1 night vision, so I couldn't record from it. But I sat there and watched him for probably 6 or 7 minutes. Shoulders about 4 feet wide. I could see him from about the waist up. And he'd stick his head up and shoulders up above the log and watch us. And very slowly sink down behind the log, move to a different spot on the log, and pop his head and body up to watch us from a different angle. And after he did that for the 5 or 6 minutes, we could hear, one of the guys had a bionic ear with us, and we could hear it walking, circling down below us in the ravine. And then it walked on out away from us. The next morning, you could see in the leaf litter on the forest floor where it had walked down the ravine. And then at the bottom of the ravine in some gravel, you could see where something had walked across it. And there was about 14-inch footprints down there. Nothing that we could do a casting of, but it was obvious where something had walked across the gravel. You don't have to spend a lot of money to start doing some Bigfoot research. All the gadgets and the cameras and recording equipment are nice, but it doesn't take long. If you find somebody that has some experience that can tell you what to look for, what to listen for, an idea of the terrain to go to, it doesn't take long to learn that. And once you do, I think you'll be amazed at how often you do hear things that are out of the norm. Lots of different organizations from state to state that are happy to have new members that will come and ask questions, and have them show you what to look for. Number one, don't panic. One of the most difficult things to do in the woods, especially if you're out by yourself late at night, a chipmunk can sound like a bull elephant going through the woods. And your imagination can be the worst part from time to time, because your imagination can run wild before you turn a flashlight on and see what it is. But also get to know the area that you're in, know what normal sounds you should hear there. And if you do have something that seems to be following you in the woods, or throwing rocks or pebbles at you, or you hear grunts or whistles or anything like that, relax a little bit, listen to what you're hearing, try and eliminate everything else. And I don't think that unless you corner one or shoot one or injure one, I don't think they're a threat. They're very good at intimidation, and chances are they know you were there before they made themselves known. But if they want you out of an area, they can intimidate you till the hair's standing up on the back of your neck and you'll want to go. But, just be careful. It's better to go with a couple people than one person out wandering around at night by themselves. Have some form of communication. Radios, you can get those fairly cheap. So that even if the other people that are with you are 50 yards away, you can still talk and say, I heard it, it was over to the left, what did you hear? But relax a little bit, pay attention to what your surroundings are, and have fun with it, but be careful.
Why is it important for the search to continue? Why the fascination with something that many believe is nothing more than tall tales?
To think that we're the only hominoid species on the planet is a big jump. All the different cultures that have histories, folklore, stories of the little people on up to giants. I think there's something to it. I think they're just about as curious as we are. If we can find out a little more about them, their habits, behaviors, I think it's worth, just for our background and history, to see what we can learn. And if we can prove that some of the folklore and stories that we've been hearing for centuries are true, that's another little bonus of the world that we live in.
Whatever direction life takes upon your journey, there are a few things that can be taken from the legend of Judaculla. This earth that we call home is a magical, mysterious place that is filled with wonder and beauty. Reconnecting with nature has a way of replenishing your soul after being taxed by the daily grind of life. However, there are still plenty of untamed places all around us, where the known and the unknown live and breathe together. It is the last of the wilds, and we should follow the teachings that were handed down long ago and be the caretakers.
Secrets lying in the ground, ground, ground. The crow is flying and I'm down, down, down. Gates of Hades swinging open now. I'm walking on the coals, I'm walking on the coals. Secrets lying in the ground, ground, ground. The crow is flying and I'm down, down, down. Gates of Hades swinging open.
Think about the last time that you were in the woods. What did you see? Have you ever wondered what saw you? Each year, there are more and more people who are sharing tales of encounters with large, hair-covered creatures, popularly known as Bigfoot. The big question being, is there any truth to these tales that date back all the way to our early ancestors? The truth is that we could watch all the videos, read the books, and examine the evidence, but the only way that we could truly answer that question for ourselves was to get off the couch and go look. So we grabbed our gear and hit the road in search of the greatest woodland mystery of all time. In our previous film, Judaculla, Legend of the Devil's Courthouse, we explored the history of sightings in an area that was sacred to the Cherokee people. In Jackson County, North Carolina, there is a large piece of soapstone with hundreds of bizarre markings that are said to have been carved by a large, hairy giant who was also a protector of the land. The tales of such creatures continue to lurk along the timeline, all the way to modern day. The focus of this series is to continue our journey down the rabbit hole in search of answers to our questions, and to potentially have an encounter of our own. One of the first tools that we acquired was the key ingredient to our adventure. The Bigfoot Mapping Project app has a wealth of information for anyone who has an interest in the subject and is looking to do their own research.
I'm Scott Tompkins. I'm the creator of the Bigfoot Mapping Project. My background professionally is a GIS professional in the energy industry, renewables, wind, solar, and natural gas and oil. And I'm a project lead professionally doing business analysis and developing new business processes and in the software development field in data management. And by night, I am, like I said earlier, the creator of the Bigfoot Mapping Project. It keeps me up late at night, making all the maps to share with everyone and keeping the database in shape. But I think it's a worthwhile project, and I'm happy to be able to share that with everyone who happens to access the map and read the sightings and submit their reports. When I was working in the field doing geophysical exploration, making maps already for my job, I had the privilege to talk with a lot of landowners all over the country in the United States. And one of the common undercurrents that people would share with me as a story about the history of their property would be weird things that happened. And a lot of times those stories that people shared involved Bigfoot. So no matter where I went, there was always a story about Bigfoot. And I started to think about how does that information get translated into something we can take action with and do analysis on. If it's just a story and people are telling it amongst themselves, it does get passed down. But what are we going to do on a larger scale to be able to find Bigfoot and take that information and put it in such a format that we can understand it on at like a data analysis level in a map view and map form. And also that experience made me realize that a lot of people have experiences and stories to share, reports about Bigfoot, but they don't necessarily go anywhere and get stored. So that was the other side of it, was creating the database and the crowdsourcing form so people have an avenue to share and report their stories and encounters. There's two types of reports in the database. There's the historical set, which are the blue, orange, and green points on the map. And as you zoom in, the symbology changes to a footprint, a Sasquatch, or an audio like speaker symbol, so you know what type of sighting it was, if it was a sighting, a footprint, or like a howl. Those are the historical sightings, and they come from an aggregation of sightings from many, many different databases, including the BFRO, all different publicly available sightings databases that were aggregated in a site called Manjani. So I picked up and cleaned up that database as a jump-off point for the crowdsourcing side, which is the database that people are now submitting sightings to. So we have kind of a demarcation of when the historical sightings stopped being captured in 2016 to where I picked up with the Bigfoot Mapping Project in 2020. And total, if you combine the historical and the crowdsourced ones in the new database, there are around 8,000, and 300 of those have been submitted since 2020. So we've got a pretty good submission rate. If you look at the total database for the historical database, there's around 70, a little over 7,000 total. And then if you look at what we've been able to capture from 2020 to now, gosh, it's 2023. It's like 100 sightings a year if you average it out, and really more than that because it hasn't been a full 2023 yet. So we're doing pretty good on capturing data, in my opinion. I think a lot of them, when you're really zoomed out and you look at the large scale map with when you're able to see the whole country, you can really lose how many of these sightings are overlapping each other, right? They just kind of merge together. When you zoom in to Washington, for example, when you zoom into Washington and an area with tons and tons of sightings like that, I think there's like 800 or so sightings alone in Washington. So you can really start to see just what their coverage really looks like when you zoom in at that level. And it's the more you explore the map, the more you realize, wow, there are a lot of sightings in this database and reports that have come in throughout the years and decades, really. But one of the first analysis that I did was on seasonal spread, basically. So I took the whole database and looked at how dispersed the sightings were in each season, right? So you can see, if we look at the map, for example, in spring, you can see they're a little more condensed. I believe that's when they might be mating, right? Or raising their young. Through summer, they're still a little more condensed, but they're starting to spread out. And then fall, when they're getting ready for a hard winter, for example, you can see that they're very spread out. And winter, again, even more spread out because theoretically food is less available. So you would have to forage more and cover more ground. So that's a theory. I think with more data, we can really get down to understanding their behavior during seasons, but a cursory look based on the historical database illustrated those simple patterns. We can get a little more complex with our analysis further down the road with more data, but at a glance, that's what I've derived from the database.
She's been so worried. Come on down from that wretched land to please hurry. Come on down, wash your face, wash your hands of that place. Why must a man break his soul on the rocks of the rivers of the mountains? Oh, but I can't, and not just yet. Can't change a man when his mind is set. And early in the morning when I rise, my love, she flies, she flies. Miss mountain sky, tell me why do I have to try so hard to get by? I've been eking out, seeking out, just scraping as I go.
Thank you, Mike. Looks like he's gonna show over there pretty good. I guess we'll go ahead and get started. I always like to ask the audience, which you guys don't have to respond, but so what we're going to do is point out a few possibilities. Because, there's a lot of theories on what Bigfoot might be. Some people think he's an alien. Some people think he's a Neanderthal or some type of ape. Then there's one I did not include on this one, which we're going to get into, we'll discuss for a little bit. Anyone familiar with Gigantopithecus? Once I learned of Gigantopithecus some years ago, how large he was believed to be. Gigantopithecus was believed to be in the orangutan family, which you'll see that shortly too. And then when we get into talking about orangutans, I made a point, I shared something about that. So Gigantopithecus, it means, the scientific terminology, it actually means giant ape. So again, I'm pointing out a few things, and I feel like I'm almost rushing through some of this. But Gigantopithecus is one of the categories where a lot of scientists actually dismiss that because fossil bone records, we only have the jawbone fossils. There were other remains in other parts of Asia later on. They actually found and discovered that there was other remains. The only remains that we physically actually know are the jawbones. It actually started off with the tooth, the discovery of the tooth, and then went into the jawbone. If there is other remains, I don't know. It was believed that other remains were actually found, but I don't know exactly what was found on the other remains. But all throughout different parts of Asia, was where Gigantopithecus was believed to exist in Rome. So this large giant ape has been proven to exist based on limited information on fossil record. So a little bit about Gigantopithecus here. We'll talk about this here. So many cryptozoologists have proposed that Bigfoot is a relic population of Gigantopithecus. The view of Gigantopithecus was previously non-bipedal. However, as mentioned in BBC is an online scientific article, Walking with Cavemen, the view of it as a bipedal ape is accepted by some scientists due to jawbone fossils. It was up to 12 feet tall on its hind leg, and it is estimated to weigh between 400 and 1,400 pounds. And of course, this is a perfect description of a living Sasquatch.
I've got a question for you. I'd love to hear. Like I made those there's new sightings submitted within like 48 hours or 10 days, or one that just happened within the last 7 days, and they're like really big and neon in the app. Does that help you find like the newest ones? It's really supposed to pull on the surface for you, so you don't have to. You won't miss anything that way when you jump into the app. I hope it helps you. I really hope it does. That was a big feature I added a few months ago.
While we were filming, a fresh report had been filed with the Bigfoot Mapping Project in an area that had already had a history of previous encounters. We quickly packed up our things and set out to see what we could find. So, we're up here today on Mount Mitchell State Park due to a recent sighting that happened within 10 days. And it intrigued our curiosity, so here we are trotting through, seeing what we can find up atop Mount Mitchell. The following is the report as it was submitted. I was woken up around 2:30 a.m. to hear 5 loud howling sounds just outside the cabin we were staying in. These did not sound like any typical animal, wolf, coyote, or elk, that I would expect to hear in the NC Mountains. My wife did not hear this since she was in another room with a fan. I had fallen asleep on the couch. The next morning, she played some Bigfoot vocalizations she had found online, and the howling sounded almost identical to what I heard. We both searched for tracks on the dirt road, but didn't find any. It's like a kind of place where you see a whole bunch of foxes.
If you decide to use the Bigfoot Mapping Project map to go in the field and do your own research, the first thing I would suggest is finding somebody who can go in the field with you. If there's, you have parents or friends who, that way you're not out in the wilderness alone. That is when a lot of accidents can happen. And if you do go alone, even with a friend or friends, the next thing would be to bring a paper map, bring enough water, make sure you know the area, make sure you at least tell somebody where you're going to be and how long you're going to be there. All the things you would do if you were going on a hike, for example. Bring a first aid kit. You never know what can happen, especially when you least expect it in the wilderness. So that's the first thing, is safety. And I should add some resources. You just reminded me. I'll add some resources for safety advice from real experts to the website. But that's the biggest one first. You can't do anyone any good if you're doing research and you get hurt out there. So be safe and be smart. Don't risk anything. Two, if you're going to do research, make sure that if you're prepared. The second thing you don't want to run into is needing to make a cast of a footprint, for example, and not having the materials to do it. So make sure that you've got your plaster of Paris, you've got a reference like a measuring tape, you've got a camera, everything's fully charged up, maybe extra batteries on the supply side for your research, bags to collect evidence, gloves, latex gloves, those types of things, even flagging.
Another nearby point on the map took us to a report that had been filed with the BFRO. The following is the encounter as it appears on the website. In early spring 1988, some friends of mine and I were traveling up the road to the top of Mount Mitchell in a four-wheel drive vehicle. Mount Mitchell is the highest peak east of the Mississippi River at 6,684 feet, and as a result, the mountain gets heavy snowfalls well into March and sometimes April. There had been some heavy snowfall in the weeks preceding our drive, and there were some deep snow drifts piled up alongside the road. Although the road had only a dusting of light snow on its surface, almost no one goes up on the mountain in the wintertime. And as I remember it, we had to skirt our way around a barricade to even get on the road to the summit. We reached the top of the mountain, then turned around to drive back down. About a half a mile below the summit, we went around a sharp left-hand turn, and our headlights hit the steep bank beside the road. In the snow on the bank, we could see several deep impressions that led up the bank and into the woods. We got out and examined the marks, but it was dark and we couldn't tell much about them. The next day, we drove back up and looked at the marks in the daylight. The tracks, as we took them to be, were in deep snow, and we could see mud at the bottom of them and measured the depth of the snow at 18 inches. In the two tracks closest to the road, there were faint outlines that could have been toe marks, but there were no claw marks visible as with bear tracks. The prints were apparently made by a bipedal animal and led up a steep bank and disappeared over the top of the bank, about 75 yards up the slope. The bank beside the road was extremely steep, and it took my friend, who is 6'2" and athletic, 8 long strides to climb the bank. But whatever left the prints needed only 2 steps. At one point, The animal had stepped over a fallen branch approximately 3 feet off the ground without breaking stride. I know sometimes big cats can leave footprints that appear to be two-legged, and there are still some panthers left in the mountains of North Carolina. But if a cat made these marks, it would have to have been the biggest panther in the world. They were about 14 inches long and 7 inches wide. We thought perhaps the marks could have been made by clumps of snow falling from trees. But there were marks where there were no overhanging branches. We split up that day, and 2 different groups walked along the road about a mile in each direction from the prints. But we never found where the animal had crossed the road, which means it was obviously using the road for traveling instead of trudging through the deep snow. We decided to hike our way to a midpoint of these 2 encounters had taken place. On several occasions, we thought we could hear something in the distance.
Get over there.
However, the strong winds and constant creaking of trees drowned out any chance of catching them on audio.
No way, that's a tree.
They're trotting around. Due to the sightings and how many there are within this, vicinity, we're just out here trying to find any signs of anything that's out there, whether it be a footprint, broken branches, twisted branches, howls, whistles, anything we can catch.
And then I'll share a few of my findings, including some of the structures and tracks. And I spoke to some of you guys about structures, and a lot of people want to know my opinion on structures. And I'll point out real quick, I am very objective when it comes to finding various structures, because a lot of what we find in the woods could be pretty much ruled off as weather. A lot of natural occurrences happen that we don't get to see and witness all the time. I mean, storms, winds, they do a lot of mysterious stuff out there, where trees fall and collide and they look like they make pretty things. A lot of these could be some kind of natural weather or wildlife pretty uneasy. I know I've had gentlemen ask me about tree structures. And again, one of the things I will tell you that there are always possibilities. Could Bigfoot have done them? Sure, why not? One of my favorite structures are TV structures. They're one of the ones that have always fascinated me. So yeah, the young lady underneath, I actually had her get underneath just to show you how high up that really is. So this was actually found in the same area. And then as far as TV structures, this is another one. This was actually found down by a creek out in my area where I do research and camping.
That's like a good 7-8 feet tall or something. Get the front point of this way so we know what to do. Dude, I mean the only way. I don't even know how you get up there human-wise in the first place and get them in there. Let's keep going. Okay. That's me. These parts of the gym, right? Huh? These parts of the gym, that one.
Now, as far as the one above, talking about the rock stack, this is a picture of something I came across some years ago. I don't know, I thought it was interesting. I'm not saying a Bigfoot did this, but yeah, as you can see right here, there's a pile of rocks right there at the base of that tree. Now there is a video, in pictures, if you go online and do a Google search, there's actually pictures of primates actually throwing them. Scientists don't know why they're doing it, but just throwing them and stacking rocks on the base of the tree. There's some ideas they threw out there, but again, primates behave in mysterious ways where scientists are still trying to figure a few things out.
Oh, right there.
I want to say there was another faint one after that, maybe? Unfortunately, our time at this location was wearing thin. To the south, and fast approaching, was a monster. As Hurricane Ian grew and continued its onslaught to the south, we took to the roads, scanning the tree lines and the darkness ahead, hoping to catch a glimpse of something.
Bears. Yes, bears and like two little ones too. Yes, bears. Oh, something else. Oh, more bears. More bears. Oh my gosh. I seen the eyes. Oh.
And it's just even more fuel to be out here talking to other people like you guys who are on the same page and have a passion to discover Bigfoot in your own area and you're doing your own research. And it gives me more drive, right, to continue building a platform, listen to how you need to receive the information, listen to your feedback about the map, try to do the best I can with the resources I've got, right? This is all a passion project, and put the map out there and make it a resource. And the fact that you guys I think it's really cool to hear how you're using the map. That's one of the things I haven't really had in one of the other interviews I've done and heard from other, I haven't heard how much those features have helped. So it's really validating, and I am very appreciative that you guys are able to use the app in the way you are, and that it's helping you figure out where you want to go, stay on top of the latest sightings, get the information you need, connect with BFRO investigators by finding it on the app. So I'm really happy to hear that. That's what it's all about. And it's just fueled by this passion and this experience and this belief. I mean, it's hard to sit here and say I look at everything in a scientific way and stay unbiased. I really do my best. But deep down, I want there to be a Bigfoot. I want to find Bigfoot. That's why I'm doing the project.
During the last century, large sections of the Balsam Mountains of western North Carolina have been logged. However, there are still some regions of old-growth forest that remain in the most remote sections of Pisgah National Forest. The area provides a corridor for wildlife to travel safely from Nantahala National Forest to the Great Smoky Mountains. Across this ocean of dirt and stone lives a wide variety of mammals such as black bear, coyotes, and deer. There are also those that say that the region is home to another hairy creature. Since the early 1900s, local residents have passed down tales of what they called Boojum, a man-like beast that roamed these mountains and collected the precious gems that are in abundance. Boojum had also befriended a local woman by the name of Annie, who had given up on her normal life in order to live in the wild with her friend. Boojum would frequently sneak away for long periods of time in order to seek out the stones that he loved so much. While he was gone, Annie would try to find him by mimicking the hooting sound that he often made, earning her the nickname Hootin' Annie. Another haunt of Boojum's was the ill-fated Eagle's Nest Hotel. Guests of the hotel would report hearing strange sounds in the night and demanded that something be done about the vile beast that had been disturbing everyone. Soon after, Boojum disappeared and Annie never saw him again. It was around this time that the Eagle's Nest Hotel mysteriously burned to the ground. While many people dismiss the tales as nothing more than folklore, the stories do have a similarity to modern-day Bigfoot encounters that are still reported all throughout the region. Folklore is often rooted in a real event. It's just that elements have evolved with retelling and the passage of time. Are there really creatures, such as the one from the legend, that roam these ancient mountains? Just a few miles away, we were gearing up for a wild night.
It's a long, long, dark road to walk alone, keeping on. It's a big black cloud ahead.
So, some months ago now, I can't remember how long ago, I was up here on the parkway one night, hanging out, going about, doing whatever. And as I was going about doing whatever I was doing, I turned around and I noticed some weird things were happening. For one, I started hearing rocks being thrown at me from afar. Didn't know where they were coming from. Two, could have swore I heard slight rustling around, moving back and forth, left to right, left to right. And then it just kept on going. After that, I started hearing some weird whistling off in the woods and didn't know what it was. At first, I didn't think much of it because after a little bit, it quit. It was silent. I didn't hear nothing else for about 5 or 10 minutes. So I was like, oh, okay, well, let me just turn back around here, mind my own business. But shortly after that happened, I ain't gonna lie, like 5 minutes later, I start hearing that same stuff again. I heard the whistling. This time it was that deep, weird whistle I've never heard before. And I ain't heard any other animal mimic it before or anything like that. So I was too scared to go up there. And after the second time it happened, after it was going on, I felt the presence of something intense just staring at me from somewheres up that way where the rocks and the whistling was all coming from. So after I felt that immense presence just staring at me, the skin was standing up on my arms, my neck, my legs, everywhere. I decided it was time to go, and this will be my first time back in a while. If I were to try to mimic it, I'd probably say it was more like a, yeah, something like that, but way deeper, more rugged, not human lungs or whatever. It was a weird whistle. It really was.
If it's anything like most of the reports that I've read, I haven't read one where they've been overly violent. Never heard of anybody being killed by a Bigfoot. Not that I've heard.
That's a good least.
So, and in my experience, it ran away, and I was much smaller than it.
I want to say it was late, like 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning, something like that. I know it was dead silent. There was no car, wasn't even no wind blowing, no nothing. No, I ain't gonna lie to you. I don't know if it was just me, but I could have sworn I smelled a slight hissy smell. Whenever, are you talking about the night it happened?
Yeah.
Yeah, the night it happened, that's when I smelled it. It wasn't strong and pungent, but it was just enough to know, oh, there was a weird, for me to pick up on it. It was enough for me to pick up on it. Yeah. Just be quiet for a few seconds.
we were sitting there, we were listening around, seeing what was going on, and as we kept walking, the first thing we hear is something being thrown from one side of the woods all the way across to the other side. Over there. And we sat there and listened for a little bit with our cameras and the light and all that, see if anything was out there. Of course, we didn't see nothing, but we caught that, and so we kept. And then after that, we kept on going a little bit, and say it was like a few minutes later, I guess, it happened again, but this time it was just on our left side. You caught that on camera, though. You very well could have just caught something. At least the sound of something.
Just that primal fear moment where you realize I am not in a good situation. This is a situation I've never been in before, right? As much as advice as I give out and anyone gives out, it really takes practice and preparation to be ready. As much as you listen to people tell you what they think you should do, in that moment, it's really like, I mean, what did I say? I stood there and I said, I see you. Like I was talking to a person, right? Another child perhaps. And
it was weird because they reacted to you.
It's bizarre.
As they understood you or something.
Right. I feel like maybe they understand body language. Maybe they understand our language, right? Maybe they can pattern us. Maybe they understand our tone, our intonation, our intent, maybe it just ran because I didn't run and it got intimidated that it knew, you know what I mean? Like who knows?
Somebody else there.
Yeah. Oh man, this other creature, this human has found me, and now I'm under, it's having the same reaction I was having probably, right?
Oh yeah, it's like, wow,
it's just as afraid of me. Like, what are you doing here? So we're both two scared animals at the end of the day, reacting how we're going to react. And
It was a tree twist. It wasn't that big. It was about 4 feet tall, but we don't know about that one. It was just a snap of some sort, but it was still an interesting capture for us. And then we tried to trail off to the woods a little bit, kind of wander off a little bit, but ended up running into a bee's house or something, so we got chased away. But oh, shit. Screw the bee, screw the bee. He's following us. Oh, okay. I don't like killer bees in the woods. And on our way back, we thought we saw like some eyes off in the woods somewhere. We tried scanning around. There wasn't nothing there. But it was weird hearing those knocks and one thing being tossed from one side to the other. It was pretty cool, pretty interesting for sure. I don't know. I'm on top of a rock over that way. Ready? Ready some? Yeah. Ooh. Our second visit to the location took us back to the area we had been previously. We wanted to take some time and explore the area in the day to see if we could find any clues. That's not it. Yeah, I do very well remember this tree. So... I don't think we went up this far, because that whole deal going around that way is different. It had to have been somewhere back within that little area right there. Think that's something? Oh, there's like a big old scrape hole thing right there or something. Yeah. So, this one just looks like it was not really splinting that all that bad. Yeah. Got some land to trot over. After documenting what we could,
We decided to press on. As the sun inched its way down behind the horizon, we took to another section of trail to see what it had in store for us.
Hell yeah. Wow. This is a good spot for one. Don't let me forget it. Recorder.
We placed our recorder at the abandoned campsite and continued deeper into the forest. Eventually, we found a suitable place to rest. Here, we turned off our lights and found ourselves engulfed by the night. We waited in silence, listening to the mountain sing its songs to us.
So, we're back here at Big Ridge Overlook. It is now fall time. Bright colors are everywhere right now. And what we're about to do is take our little nifty device from a good buddy of ours at work, the Jimbo box as we call it, and we're going to stuff a recorder in there and we're going to leave it overnight. We have had our experiences thus far, and some of them have creeped us out a little bit and got us a little curious, always making us want to come back. So I think we're doing pretty good right now. Nothing on? Was it fully charged?
Oh, I checked it out.
Something odd had happened on this trip. Our digital recorder, that we had used numerous times without fail, wasn't working. The battery had been fully charged in a test earlier, and the day had worked perfectly. It took several minutes to get the device to turn on. It had never done this before. After recovering the recorder, the next day we found that it recorded all night without further incident. We also performed multiple tests with turning the recorder on and off. Everything worked perfectly fine now.
I heard something over there. It was like a something. Yeah.
The following is what we caught on that final night. It was recorded during the hours of 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. The most intriguing capture of the night came in the form of some kind of distant sound. We weren't sure what to make of it, and the sound quality was poor due to wind. We decided to send the recording to several people to get their opinions. The first person to respond was Mark Newbill of the Sawdust Beast podcast on YouTube. He had the following to say. I wasn't able to filter the targeted audio to give you my opinion of what could have made the vocal/noise. I used a noise reduction filter, removing 12 decibels. It is very distant, and with the wind blowing, I was not able to extract it without compromising the integrity of the recording. You can see on the spectrogram that's between 516 to 602 Hz, which is possible to be on the lower end of the frequency signature of what I normally look for. But with it being distant and the background noise, we don't get a clear picture of what it might be. I've included your spectrogram along with a spectrogram of what I believe is a Bigfoot frequency signature. Sorry I couldn't be more helpful. Mark.
Oh my gosh, that's like the biggest web. You know what I'm gonna call this?
Huh.
Spider Alley.
Oh, look at that bad boy.
Ain't gonna get me.
Right now I get to show you a couple of my findings. I should have had a lot more put on here. There's other tracks I found over the years. I know I'm kind of doing it back. I should show all this first. But yeah, this was actually one of the tracks I found a few years back in Virginia, but it was very close to the West Virginia line. I know because everything's on the screen, everything looks shorter, but I promise you it was around 17 and a half inches long. Here's another one. That was found in part of the George Washington National Forest. I don't know if you're familiar with any of the forests up in Virginia, but the George Washington National Forest, just one other track.
Last year, while filming for Judaculla, Legend of the Devil's Courthouse, we got to sit down with a local investigator and were able to discuss a couple of encounters, one being visual.
We got a report from some trout fishermen that had been hiking up to a wild trout stream, and they'd hiked about 5 miles back into the woods and camped there for 2 nights. And the first night they heard something circling their camp.
The following is the report as it appears on the BFRO database. A couple of my college roommates and I decided to go trout fishing on the Thompson River in Oconee County, South Carolina. I grew up close to here and had fished the Whitewater River extensively, so I was pretty familiar with the area. I had also planned on making this trip a deer scouting excursion as well. We set off for the journey with the intention of not taking a vehicle, even though the gravel road is open at this time of year. We wanted to get a little exercise and make the most of the next 2 days of crisp, cool fall weather. We reached the river after about a 4-hour hike and were all anxious to start fishing. Our luck was great and time slipped away to the dusky twilight before we knew it. We stumbled our way through the dense laurel thickets until we found a suitable camp spot. The spot wasn't well used, but had an established fire pit, so we were pretty happy. As my one roommate and I put up the tent, the other started to cook the fish we had caught earlier in the day. The fish were just about done when we hear an almost childlike cry from the ridge above about 200 yards away. My 2 buddies were instantly asking me what that sound was with a childish fright in their voice. I grew up bear hunting in these mountains and have heard some pretty freaky noises. Most could be attributed to bobcats, coyotes, or the occasional mountain lion. I thought nothing of this sound and assured them that it was most likely a bobcat. We sat down to eat, and the sound would happen about every 2 minutes or so. It appeared to be moving slightly, but was hard to pinpoint because of the terrain and echoes, and then it just stopped. After dinner, we built a small fire and had a chew. As we were winding down the night, we all hear something land in the camp spot with a thud. We looked around and decided it was probably an acorn falling. Then another thud. This time I saw the object, and it was a smooth river stone from the river that was at least 100 yards away. This freaked me out, so I dug into my pack and fetched my 9mm. Upon my suggestion, we carefully scavenged the nearby woods for enough wood to make a decent-sized fire. The rocks would thud periodically, but were never bigger than quarter-sized pebbles. Once the fire was going, everything stopped, for a while. I also yelled out that I had a gun and to stop messing around if they could hear me. At this point, we figured it to be someone rather than something. We stayed up till about 4 a.m., spotlighting anything that moved in the leaves nearby. We agreed to take double watch shifts, with 2 watching and 1 sleeping. About 4:30, we heard the crying noise again, and was still in the same location as before. This lasted about 2 minutes. and was followed by 3 very loud and distinct knocks. This sounded like green wood being pounded against a rock or a tree trunk. This would occur about every 10 minutes or so, and would be preceded or followed by the crying sound, which was in the opposite direction. We all stayed up until the sun came up and dismissed the whole incident as someone messing with us. We decided that since we were already here, we may as well fish our way back to the road. We were all a little rattled from the experience, especially them, because they never were more than 20 or so yards away from me all morning. As we came to waterfalls or rough patches in the river, we would walk a couple of 100 yards or so into the woods to get out of the laurel thickets around the river. I used the opportunity to look for deer/bear signs. In one spot, we noticed that the ground had been absolutely destroyed with animal sign. 3 or 4 large scat piles were concentrated around 2 large white oak trees. To me, it looked like a bear sign, somewhat, but I've never seen that much traffic sign in one area before. We walked back to the vehicle without incident, and now tell the story from time to time.
My name's Jim Charneski. I'm a field researcher for Bigfoot Field Research Organization, and I live in western North Carolina. And a group of us investigators headed down there and backpacked into where the fishermen had been. First night there, we didn't hear or see anything. So we decided to move camp. And right above where the trout fishermen had been, at the top of the ridge, there was 3 ridges that joined in one spot. And there was game trails along the tops of those ridges. So we camped at the top where those 3 trails met. And we sat there, and each one looking over the other person's shoulder so they could see down the game trail. And one of the guys said, "Jim, grab your night vision, there's one behind you." And in the time it took for me to reach down, get my night vision, turn, and look at it, it had stepped off the trail behind a very large fallen pine tree. And unfortunately, this was an older Generation 1 night vision, so I couldn't record from it. But I sat there and watched him for probably 6 or 7 minutes. Shoulders about 4 feet wide. I could see him from about the waist up. And he'd stick his head up and shoulders up above the log and watch us. And very slowly sink down behind the log, move to a different spot on the log, and pop his head and body up to watch us from a different angle. And after he did that for the 5 or 6 minutes, we could hear, one of the guys had a bionic ear with us, and we could hear it walking, circling down below us in the ravine. And then it walked on out away from us. The next morning, you could see in the leaf litter on the forest floor where it had walked down the ravine. And then at the bottom of the ravine in some gravel, you could see where something had walked across it. And there was about 14-inch footprints down there. Nothing that we could do a casting of, but it was obvious where something had walked across the gravel.
lot of these sightings have occurred from people going out hiking, camping, fishing, biking maybe, and they're just going out doing normal stuff. And whenever there is a sighting in an area such as this, most of the times the sighting is from a fellow passerby hiking in the woods. So we're out here kind of doing the same thing per se. We're just out here doing a little hike, you know, waiting until nighttime to roll around, and then we're just gonna see what we come across, and whatever happens, we'll have it on camera, and I think it'll be a worthwhile trip.
Yeah. The legs is already burning. I heard him walking over there. Still a few steps in there.
While we were exploring the area, we came across an impression in the hard, packed dirt that caught our eye. It appeared to be a print of some kind and looked as if toes were visible. While it is possible that the print could be human, this is not an area that would be a good idea to hike barefoot in February. There is also the chance that it could belong to a bear, but black bears should be in hibernation this time of year. We documented the site for later analysis and continued on.
And I'll be one of the first to tell you, and I'm sure if you guys found tracks yourselves or ever come across tracks, when you see them in person, sometimes the details and it just shows up so good. You ever take a picture of a track? You try it with your own foot. The picture won't show the detail and the definition. Unfortunately, pictures don't do justice when it comes to tracks. It's kind of I don't know why, but it aggravates me sometimes because when I find tracks, I want to take pictures and document them. And I try to share them with people. I say, well, unfortunately, you don't see what I'm showing you because, what I've seen in person, it's not comparing. Nothing to compare it to.
There's nothing.
The only thing really is just a faint sound of a leaf falling here and there.
Oh yeah, dude, that is pretty.
However, what modern society doesn't realize is that this creature is nothing new. Indigenous people across the globe have had relationships with these creatures for hundreds of years. And when it says hundreds, there's another presentation I want to interrupt on this real quick. Hundreds of years is kind of an understatement. I believe it's been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. I mean, you can multiply that by whatever you feel comfortable with. And then often associate them with natural or spiritual phenomena. Tribal beliefs based their Bigfoot stories either on actual encounters or mystical perceptions of natural spirits. Now, I want to stop there real quick and point this out. A lot of people look towards our Native Americans on history of Bigfoot, the Bigfoot's presence or the existence. But one thing, as it states, natural spirits. Even with our known various species of wildlife, deer, the eagle, whatever known species that we know that does exist, a lot of Native Americans actually look and refer to them in a spiritual sense, although we know them to be flesh and blood. I just want to point that out.
it messes with
Right.
you. It changes your paradigm, changes your outlook on the world and everything around you. When I know these things exist, I know they exist, I know they're real, but how to place them in my box, so to speak, my worldview, my idea of existence, it's hard to do. You know, there are some pieces of the puzzle that just don't fit. And that, I guess that's what I'm trying to do more than anything, just trying to get them to fit. My name's Matt Sieber. I am the founder of EastTennesseeBigfoot.org. Starting in 2005, I started this organization after my then 15-year-old son had an encounter in our backyard in East Tennessee, Roane County specifically. Felt like we weren't taken seriously by some of the groups that were prominent at the time, and I decided to take it upon myself to start this organization in order to try to gather evidence and information about Bigfoot in this area where I live. There are stories from the Cherokee about these beings. There are stories about them kind of dealing with the settlers of the Smoky Mountain area before it actually became the national park. There are stories of well, actually, my grandfather told me a story when he told me when he was very young that he and his brother were out in the garden doing some garden work for their dad. This was probably maybe 1920, 25. I'm not sure exactly when that was, but his brother was chased out of the woods by something. My grandfather never saw it, but he was adamant that he was chased out of by some large, hairy, black thing that was chasing him out of the woods. So that's probably the oldest story that's ever been told to me personally, and it was from my grandpa. And of course, I didn't put two and two together till well after his death in 1993, and my son had his encounter. And then I thought, wow, maybe there's something more to this, because I never did even contemplate the idea that these beings were in this part of the country. I was always under the impression it was a Pacific Northwest issue for the most part. In 2005, the summer my son had his encounter, I had already known that this had happened, and it was on my mind. And I was somewhat concerned that something was running around our neighborhood at night. I had just climbed into bed and put my head on the pillow, and this sudden intrusive feeling came over me. It was just very strange. And I heard a voice in my head, an audible voice in my head that said, "I am here." It was not, "Hello, I'm here." It had no emotion. It was an emotionless type of communication. It was just, "I'm here." It was a matter of fact statement. And it rattled me. It really did. I didn't know what to do with it. I wasn't sure of what that meant. Many times I've thought to myself that I was just making that stuff up in my head. I wasn't sure if it actually happened, but I can't let it go. I can't let it go. And I don't know if it really happened or not, but I believe it did. The more I've done this and looked into this stuff, the more common that seems to be in Bigfoot experience. There are people who have these kinds of experiences where they even see visions. And like I say, I didn't mention this, but when I heard that voice, I had this vision in my mind of these two large black eyes surrounded by hair. That's what I felt. That's what I saw in my mind. And I heard an audible voice. It wasn't my voice. It was a voice I had never heard before. And it was as plain English as you and I are speaking, but it was very unsettling. That's an unknown. It's a good question to ask. Is that that them? Is that one of those beings projecting fear into you? Or is it just an instinctual thing that there's something out there that your body's picking up on that you need to get away from? I have a good friend that's had things like that happen, and she's told me on more than one occasion when she's had encounters with these things that it was just like, it was the words in her head is basically what she said. She had it. She said it was mind speaking as far as she was concerned, and it said, "Leave now, leave now." That was the two things that was always said. And I have found that a lot of times when this kind of stuff happens, it's a very short statement. It's not a bunch of speaking. It's not a bunch of talking. It's just a quick statement. And it may have just been in your mind that you needed to get the F out of there. But then maybe again, that thought may have been planted into your mind. There's a place called Judaculla Creek. I'm pretty sure it's in the Cherokee National Forest. There has been a lot of activity in that area over the years. I believe it's very possible that a lot of the things that people are experiencing that are considered what they call the woo may be due to infrasound that these beings are able to produce. There are scientific evidences about the animal kingdom that certain animals produce infrasound. Big cats are able to confuse and sort of mess with the minds of their prey just for a few seconds before they pounce, gives them a little bit of an advantage. And I think that there could be possible with these beings as well. They may be able to manipulate our minds with infrasound or maybe other means. I'm not, I can't go into specifics there because I'm not really sure, but they may be able to just mess with our minds enough. I know I'm sure, again, we go back to the mind speak. That's in the realm of the paranormal. That's not something that's day-to-day life for human beings. So maybe they also have the ability to manipulate our minds and what we see and what we think, cause us to have some sort of hallucination, cause us to be dizzy, off kilter. I know of people who have had these episodes where they've been zapped and it has physical effects on them. It makes them sick, makes them very ill, very dizzy. And it just may be a way that they protect themselves or protect their territory without having to become physically involved with us. They can do it from a distance. No. I mean, I've had people take video recordings of a specific incident that happened to a couple that were in my group at one time. The lady, she quit the group shortly after that incident, and then the gentleman that was in the group, he passed away. So I can't give you this as they would give it. But they took a camera to a place, and they were basically being attacked from a distance. They were They were outside the vehicle. They had already, the gentleman had already been hit with something one time. He like zapped. I say that he was hit with something that made him get sick. He had to leave. Once he drove out of the area, he felt better, so they turned around and went back. He got back out of the truck again and started feeling sick again, but she stepped between him and the wood line, and it stopped. And he was able to carry on. This whole time she was video recording with just a handheld video recorder. And just all of a sudden the woods came alive. There was screaming. There was branches breaking. There were limbs snapping. There was trees shaking and all this kind of stuff. And they decided that they didn't want to go any deeper into the woods, so they left. And it's a relatively well-known area that researcher Scott Carpenter visited quite a bit in his research. And as they were going down the road, she turned on the camera and started watching what she had recorded, and all the things that they had experienced, everything that they had seen, all the sounds, all the shaking, all the limbs breaking, all the snapping, and all that stuff was not on the recording. It was a peaceful recording of the wood line. There was nothing like that really happening, which again, that's not the camera's fault. I believe, again, that's proof that these beings are able to project thoughts and hallucinations into our minds and into our heads to make us see things that aren't really happening. So that's probably one of the most interesting things that's ever happened in my group. And I'm adamant. I know that the gentleman that was with her, I know he was truthful. I didn't know her for very long, but I believe that he trusted her, so that was good enough for me. And I know he wouldn't have lied to me about what was going on around them.
In 2014, it was actually during one of my boot camp outs. We had, there was 6 of us all together, and we did some daytime exploring. We looked around, buying a few things. But it was May 3rd of 2014 when we decided to go out at night. Of course, when we left the camp, it was still daylight. And there's a lake in here where we camped at, it was about a mile, almost a mile. And we decided to just head out on foot to head down to the lake. And what was nice was there was nobody there. Usually there's people fishing down there, so there was nobody there, so we had the whole lake to ourselves. And we spread out around the lake, we paired up the tubes. And after hanging out there, we had radio communication. We had parabolic mics. We were listening to the sounds. There was a ridge up behind us and a small mountain across the lake on the other side. And we weren't really hearing nothing much was going on. We did hear a few minor limb snap, walk behind us. Yeah, it could have been anything. Well, I decided, I radioed down, there was a couple that were joining us from Vermont. And Kimmy and Darren, and I radioed down to Kimmy. Let me tell you something, if you guys are familiar with Bobo's howl or vocalizations when finding Bigfoot, well, Kimmy, she's just a little thing, but she had, I don't know how to describe her, she's actually awesome on her vocals. I call her the mini female version of Bobo. But she put out a vocalization, and of course, it would display echo right after she got done. We all listened, and it probably wasn't 10 seconds after the echo, and all of a sudden we got a response. It wasn't close, but it wasn't too far either. We all got to hear that. Oh, okay, this is awesome. Could have been a coyote, could have been somebody else out in the woods somewhere responding, maybe. But yeah, I thought it was cool that we could get a response from her vocalization. So after some time was going by, like I said, it was dark and we weren't getting no activity, nothing was happening. So we decided to regroup and head back to camp. So we get together and we're walking a single file line. I'm in front of everybody. And we're all talking at all the time, we're not trying to be quiet. And coming up before we get out to the main road, the main forest road, what was interesting was right up in front of me, I keep looking at you, I don't know why, but as far as close as I am to being you, there was a deer walking, it was very odd, he was just walking right towards us. And before that deer came on, it was like, as close as I am to you, and it's one off into the darkness. What was it was odd, but why did that deer not seem spooked? We had headlamps on, we were all talking, but it just not showing up. It just walked towards us and then walked off into the woods, disappeared further into the dark. Well, right after that, as soon as we passed the deer right in the woods, over on my left, on the opposite side of the forest road, something catches my attention. Something I'm seeing reflecting over there. And it's kind of, probably as low as from here to where that white chair is up against the wall over there. There's something bright and yellow reflecting. My first initial thought was it was one of the little yellow signs that you see in random places in the national forest. And usually all they say in our area, they say no vehicles beyond this point. But I'm seeing this, I was like, that's a weird place for something like that to be. But I'm staring there, and all of a sudden it becomes in focus. It blinks. Well, and that's when I realized it's a set of eye shot. Behind me was my buddy Tracy. Tracy, what is that? And of course, the words I used then are a little different. I thought it was a mountain lion. I said, is that a flipping mountain lion? I don't know why. It was the first thought that came in my head. They were large, bright yellowish eyes, and they were sitting kind of low, Well, it might have been a little further than that chair. And all of a sudden, we're both staring at it, and all of a sudden, we see it zoom off. I didn't know what the heck it was. One other animal I seen out in the woods out there with bright yellow eyes. These raccoons have very bright yellow eyes. Trying to light in your eye and see yellow. Well, I didn't even think of a raccoon, but I was like, they look different, they look much larger. But it disappeared, it took off. And then Tracy told the rest of the guys, get up here, we got some eye shine up here. So we all get up in that location where we started zip on, we get up there, we're all standing in our road cluster, like I said, there's 6 of us. And we're all looking out in the woods, you see it again. And it's probably 30, 40 feet from us. And we had no clue what we're looking at. We all had headlamps on, a couple of them were bright. And all we're just seeing the eye shine. Well, one thing about this one that we're staring at is it's swinging side to side very fast. It's got this swift motion. Okay, this is cool. it's a mystery. We don't know what we're observing. We don't know what we're seeing. But again, it was just that one, and then maybe a minute or two later, there was another one that appeared about 5 to 6 feet away. Another set of eye shine appeared. Now keep in mind, for the record, this small set of eye shine that's swaying side to side, we estimated it had been around 4 feet tall, whatever it was. Here's another one, 2 feet taller. Same color eye shine, very large and bright, reflecting off her headlamp. And it didn't have no movement, but it did blink its eyes on occasion, while the small one was still swaying side to side. And we're staring at this. And for the record, I will say Bigfoot, Sasquatch, nowhere on the mind, because there wasn't enough information to say what these were. I mean, I'm trying to go through my mind and go through my mind's database, trying to identify what we might be looking at here. Well, things change here after a while. We're all staring at this, and I'm starting to scan off. I'm looking around in the woods, and you can't see that far into the woods because even though there was all that thick brush and a few trees in here, the night, I guess because this took place after midnight, by the way. A lot of the air, there was a lot of, I don't want to say, I guess fog. I mean, the damp and cool air came in, and so you can only see it so far. But another set of eye shine caught my attention. This third set of eye shine started off like literally looking down at the ground. It was literally on the ground. At least that's the way it looked to me. And I am staring at it, and without taking my eyes off it, I point it out, and I'm staring at it. And all of a sudden, this third set of eye shine starts moving upward, and it keeps moving. And it's like it's growing or raising up or something. And all of a sudden, it comes over top of the bushes, and it comes through the clear part. And all of a sudden, that set of eye shine stops. And now it's towering over top of the 6 foot one, the one that we estimated to be around 6 feet. So now we have a 4 foot subject that's still swaying side to side. We have the second subject that's just standing there. Now we have this 8 foot subject, easily 2 feet over top of the 6 foot one. And a large, again, all 3 of them had large yellowish looking eyes. Well, that large one actually ended up making a maneuver where, looking at, like say you guys were me, and I'm the 8 foot subject. It actually looked like it literally turned to its left, took a step or two, stopped, and turned back. And when it turned and made that whole maneuver, I believe it was the right angle, the right positioning. The lighting caught it just right. And what I was able to clearly see was very wide, broad shoulders and a big round head just sitting on those broad shoulders. It was completely round. It didn't look pointed at all. A lot of people said they see a pointed head. This did not have a pointed head. It was completely round, almost like a football helmet. You know, it wasn't pointed. It was a big fat dome sitting on wide, broad shoulders. And when I seen that, well, let me back up a little bit. My buddy Tracy, before that was observed, my buddy Tracy's like, guys, we got squatchers. That was before I seen all that. But when he said that, I needed something to confirm it. But when I witnessed that bear, I was like, these ain't bears. I said, these gotta be squat. What the heck else are they? You know, again, we've only seen that shape in the silhouette. And we're only seeing large, bright, yellowish looking eyes. All 3 of them displayed the same color eye shine. They blinked on occasions here and there, but that small one, I say he, I don't know what, but it stayed swaying side to side. I don't know what it was. They say primates do that. Why? Because it's part of their anxiety. It's something, you can't stay still. I don't know, but I am convinced what we saw, what we witnessed that day in May 3rd, 2014, was possibly a family unit.
I had an encounter with what I believe was a Bigfoot. I wish I could say definitively if it was or not, but it was in Sealy, Texas. I was actually finishing up bow hunting, and I was walking out, and it was dusk. It was too dark to shoot. So I just wanted to make my way out quietly. And I was coming out of a river bottom kind of scrub brush area up into a pasture. So I had to go through a barbed wire fence and then back to my truck. And as I was walking out, I look to my left, and the barbed wire fence is now on my left, and the scrub brush area is also down on my left. And my truck's about 100 yards ahead of me. And I look to my left after I get further down along the barbed wire fence, and there's a dark, shadowy blob behind a bush, a thin, scraggly scrub bush. So I assumed, being Texas, I assumed it was a hog, right? Because there are plenty of hogs where I hunt. There's a lot, as a matter of fact. So I just stood still. I was going to let it get on its way and then just walked to my truck, but it wasn't moving. And I was, not sure what to do. And then as I was thinking about, all right, what's going on here? It stood up. Whatever it was, I assume it was a Bigfoot, but like I said, I can't really tell you 100%. It stood up and it had wide shoulders, long arms. It looked like a football player with pads on, just huge. And his head was massive. And the grass is pretty tall, I would say waist high for me. So 3 or 4 feet for, varying. So I couldn't see its lower half of its body. And when it stood up, I just stood there. And all I could say was, whoa. Just like that. And it squatted back down almost instantly after I said, whoa, because I was just kind of in shock and I really wasn't sure what was happening at the time. I just think I was kind of in a little bit of fight or flight mode and just buffering the situation in my processor of a brain, and it stood there it squatted back down, and I was stood there for a second and I didn't know what to do. So I said, maybe stupidly, I don't know. I said, I see you. Kind of just like that, maybe a little more shaky because I was nervous. But immediately after I said that, it stood back up, it turned, did a 180 and bolted into the woods. I mean, bolted, crashing through the brush. Everything was just snapping and breaking. You hear sticks and branches breaking as it was making its way through the thicket that it ran into. And it just wasn't a person at this point. There's no way a person could run without a headlamp or a flashlight at the speed it was, where it was running, without falling, hurting themselves, or anything like that. So that's when the encounter ended. So I made my way back to my truck because it was dark, got in my truck and called my mom first and called my wife and said, "You'll never believe this," and shared the story I just shared with you. And I'm fairly lucky. I think that just happened last year.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah. And it was after I started the project, and I couldn't believe, that it was happening, A, and B, of course, now that I share this story, people are going to, I know it's going to be said, of course, the Bigfoot mapping guy had an encounter, right? But I couldn't make it up. I couldn't make it up if I wanted to. There's just no way. If I could transfer the feeling that I had in that moment to somebody just so they could understand how genuine and the weird, the primal fear that pulses through your body when instincts take over and you're in this moment of fight or flight when you're not sure what's going on in a situation. And it just, if I could share that with someone, I think it would just speak volumes about the experience. And it's hard to relay that in words, especially not in person, but it is something that I think I'm lucky to have experienced. And I hope one day that I'll have another encounter and have better proof other than a story next time. I really hope so. I've learned a lot, actually, more than I expected. One of the things that I've learned is how people react to having a sighting. I never, initially, I was just thinking about data and capturing reports, and it was kind of an impersonal interaction. It wasn't necessarily, it didn't occur to me that it would be so personal for so many people to share their information and their sightings on a platform like this. And the more that I'm active in the community and talking with people and listening to what they have to say and receiving reports, getting requests, and just talking with other researchers, that's one of the biggest things that I've learned, is how it really stays with people and affects them, and how it really can be a defining moment in somebody's life. Really kind of much like you were describing earlier, before we started the call. But yeah, so I've learned a lot. And I think most of all, though, is the human side. It's something that was unexpected. Obviously, I set out to learn how to build an app. So, I mean, I'm glad I was successful, and it's not a surprise, right? Because I was trying to do that. But I always like the things that come out of something that were unexpected, that are positive, right? And I think much like our interview, the human side of things, and getting to meet new people and hear their stories and help with their research is a big, nice reward that's unexpected from creating a project and keeping it going.
You know, there's a saying that's perfect for this kind of situation. So, the saying I have for something like this, let me find it here. You should enjoy the little detours to the fullest, because that's where you'll find the things more important than what you want.
I think more people need to get out and explore. And I think they'd be surprised. There would be a lot of skeptics that changed their opinion if they just spent more time in the wilderness. I really believe that.